Well, hello everyone. Here to show you right here. I'm talking about codes right here, and a lot of times it sure seems that way. That when we do speak about dreams, a lot of times that you want to know too is to where the things for what you can do with certain characters and certain codes, right? And just like you're putting a puzzle together right here. But a lot of times it sure seems that way. That whenever I look at codes, a lot of times you probably think about is as to where really what exactly is it that you really are looking for in any source of character, right? And like 102, that whenever you do look at it, that you are basically are writing words with no spaces, and some of the time it seems like that whenever it comes to coupon codes, and maybe whenever it comes to certain character codes, access codes, that sorts of stuff. But a lot of times it's like, yeah, so if you were to look at the writing right here from up above right here, if like, the other person and I were talking about while we were having, ice cream, that, we were talking about things. And so, yeah, so if you were to actually look at all this paragraphing right here and want to know too yeah, how would this look like if you were to actually if you would actually program it, to using any source of code, and like in case of anybody that may say that, yeah, well, in case if you didn't know or something like that, and yeah, that do you think that you would you'll use that, like, yeah. So in case if you did not know, yeah, so if you would actually if we could all see that right there, that you go ahead and use it into in case if you did not know, if you were to actually use it with no spaces right there, that do you think that maybe that could be what you call an example of what you call like a type of character code? And I can put on here for 4503 or something like that. And you will know too is toward it really that when we do speak about codes though, and if it's a username or a password or something like that, and you want to know too that really that how many of us are really are going to dream about having that ability to where you can go ahead and set program a code like that, like he would say up to 30 characters long and thick as toward, okay, yeah, so number one, that whenever you think about that you're actually are making the paragraphs shorter. So like let's just say that in case of anybody that may want to know too, is to where if you read the full letter from up above here, and let's just say that this letter right here was supposed to be like a paper including maybe the recording of an argument or an agreement or something like that, and year 102, that yeah, that the things like, yeah, for what you're talking about from earlier and stuff like that, and a 102, that yeah, so if you read this writing right here and you're warned to where that just to get a better understanding about it, that you're warned to where that when we speak about codes and when we speak about characters, right, that's basically another language. And to me, it's like, yeah, it's another language of how to chunk down, break down a lot of the long, you know, explanations, and especially if we're talking about a lot of the conversations, right? So, like, let's just say that if you would actually be using any of the language right here as like a source of code, and like everybody say that, yeah, well, really, that and for sure that those codes, it'll be those codes and those coupons and all that. Quite a few of them, quite a few of those codes are due to expire, and quite a few of those codes, of course. So I'm like, yeah. So it's like, you don't really want to use one that you can memorize, and maybe that yeah. So like, when we do speak about codes, a lot of times that we're also talking about, just for security purposes, right? But still, that I'm talking about the type of language to where you use no spaces right here, like maybe a few dashes and all that. and quotation marks and maybe curly brackets, and you would include a certain character at about right here. And 102 that yeah, something that you could easily remember, and something that you would be able to recognize especially. But it's like each time we do think about that, and you're thinking is toward a yeah, every time you do think about that, and you're warned to where that right there is the type of language that you would normally be using, maybe if you were texting somebody, or maybe saying something like a good morning and I love you or something like that. So it's like, yeah, so if you were to actually use that, maybe like for like a password or something like that, and like everybody may say that good morning, I love you or something like that. Yeah, with no spacing like that. And you want to know too that do you think that maybe anybody would think of that idea to where that if you would want to use that for any, I'm like, yeah, maybe for a greeting, but not really, you're for a password or any source of code. And want to know too that if you're going to be writing a like that, and like using for a username or maybe any source of password, but really though but you're wanting to know too that a lot of stuff about the codes and certain characters and all that, would anybody really be dreaming about having that ability to where that just like solving a puzzle, that what you're basically are doing is you're connecting, you're what you basically are doing is you're filling in these gaps to where that if you were to like yeah, if you were to maybe if you're going to be filling out any source of paperwork, and let's just say that if you leave a few blanks on a certain paragraphs of the line or something like that, I'm like, I really don't know, but still, that the way we think about that though is it sure seems that way. That every time I think about that, and I want to know too that yeah, that when we think about codes a lot of times, that it's the same. It's pretty much the same thing is using the keywords and tools. You're using tools, right? But these are like commands that you're basically are doing just to be able to give you access, just to be able to allow it to where you now have the ability to where you can save money. You now have the ability where you have access to your own account, and of course other ways of how you want to describe for codes and characters. But to me, though, it's like yeah, since I was younger, that you probably had gotten a little bit of that knowledge just by solving puzzles. If it's crossword puzzles or anything, but still, we're talking about the type of language that you're using with no spaces right here, no spacing. What you would be doing is you would be using certain syllables and all, but still, it's like the way we think about that, though, and want to know too that okay, yeah, so that right there, if that right there is supposed to be a complete sentence right here, and let's just say that the good morning breakfast or something like that. So if you were to include a time zone on there, so if you were to include a certain character like that, I mean, I really don't know if anybody has thought about that, but really that could you possibly use that as for like a username or a password right here, to where that you go ahead and include a certain character, and then if you were to like breakfast for I at or my gives at so yeah, nobody's really going to know what that really is right there, especially if we're talking about no spaces in between. So if you were to actually be using it for any source of code, right? Any source of code, and 102 with no spacing, that's not really a complete sentence right there. But if it could be used for like any source of character, for any source of code, right? And you're thinking as to where that if you want to go ahead and maybe use that maybe just for anything such as okay, yeah, that if you want to use that maybe for a password or something like that, or maybe that if you were actually working on something, maybe for programming or something like that, for good morning breakfast is at 9 a.m. And like everybody else would say that, really, that, what does it look like whenever if you were to write it backwards? Like let's just say that if I were to put 9 a.m. right here, a.m. 9, and then a TAS, for TAS, and then TAS, AF, K, KA, E, KAB, and then let's see here, GNI, R, is it, NR, OM, DRG. So yeah, good morning, breakfast at 9 a.m. Spelt backwards. And so how many of us would really, if you really want to give that a try, but it sure seems that way, that, that spelled backwards, I'm like, why do you think that seems to be, why does that seem to be 2 or 3 different things here? Just because maybe one complete sentence right here is supposed to be like any source of code, right? Why do you think good morning breakfast at 9 a.m. is so totally different than compared to how it's pronounced right here? Pronounced backwards. So anybody who's going to be working the codes, or maybe going to kind of look back at that in 102, is to where that it seems like it's telling you 2 or 3 different things, but it's really supposed to be, it's the same thing, but it's just written backwards. And just for any sorts of security reasons, for sure, that you would go ahead and do that. And let's just say that for morning or something like that. And how do you spell morning? If it's G-N-I, R, N-R, or something like that, I'm like, go morning or something like that. And so it's like, so if you would actually write something like that, maybe a certain word or a certain phrase like backwards, and so you're 102 that you write like that. You write like that, and then you go ahead and put on here 5613 right there. 5613. And then you include maybe a creation, and then underscore, and then along with something like the shopping mall at your next right or something like that. And so I'm just period, next right. So it's like so when we think about the codes, though, when we think about typical coding, though, do we really look at that as another way of how you want to call us, as toward giving directions, or that's the type of language programming, or if anything, like a lot of marketing sites would also say too, that's another way of how to give their customers and their shoppers that ability to where they can shop online to the inventory, right? And then where that maybe something that they can easily have handy, or maybe something that they can easily remember, just to be able to know that the next time you sign into your account, that please use this use this code right here for your reference, and maybe for an extra 10% off or something like that. So really so each time we think about codes, though, and characters, that do we necessarily think about that is to where that messages, like anybody might even say too, that questions and answers from earlier, and anything that you may have learned whenever you were talking to one of your former classmates right here, and people might even say is that really that you know, codes, our codes really have that ability to where that you can just, you can't just really just make them up either. But if you were able to write down the codes with your left hand or with your right hand, but let's just say that on the other hand too, that the codes are supposed to be used, just like a type of language, right? The type of language to where you can now use them. You just to be able to set the security, for authorization, and of course, for other things that we use for everyday purposes too, especially from our iPhones, right? And that is why it sure seems that way. That every time we think about a code, though, that it's basically, is it basically the same thing as writing is toward, I'll meet you at the mall at 5 o'clock with no spaces. And let's just say that if you were to, I'm like, yeah, with no spaces right here, and I'll meet you, I'll meet you at the mall. So yeah, no spaces, and so it sure seems that way. That the way we think about that, though, in using no spaces, why does that seem to be, like, yeah, like everybody else might say that, that's not really recognizable, right? If I were to make this bigger right here, if you were to write that, and maybe if you were to use that as like for a code, then that's not really, people would not even know what that is right there. So it's like, to me, it's like if you were to think about that as a code, for sure that you would maybe think that to where that okay, I'm like, I don't know what that is right there, but that what that basically says is toward I'll meet you at the mall at 5 o'clock right here. And so yeah, that so if you were to write that into if you were to write that onto a document with no spacing at all, with no spacing, well, what do you think? I'm like, yeah, like everybody might even want to know too that the same measure goes by to where when we talk about characters and codes right here and passwords, that the same thing that you are basically are saying is toward it. It's just like leaving at least a three paragraphs letter. If you're going to be writing a letter to a loved one, that what you basically are doing is like, you're writing them a letter saying that I would like to meet you for lunch at 5 o'clock or something like that, and while we're there, we can go ahead and walk around and go to the gift shop or something like that. And think about that is to where you're actually are writing a letter with no spacing in between. You could include a star and maybe a semicolon or maybe a few parentheses or something like that. But you want to look at the like codes as something like that, to where that you would use that for your for your access, right? But to me though, it's like you might even think as to where that your own handwriting that is being used, right? And like everybody else might say that with most codes, though, with most characters and codes, that just for your security purposes too, that you can maybe think about that as to where that codes could probably be easier to be recognized even more. Maybe if you just could figure out just a little bit about how it all works, and maybe just for security purposes, but could you possibly look at that as to where it's another way of saying is to where that you're writing in a complete sentence right here with no spacing in between. And if you want to go ahead and I mean, if you want to put on here, something such as to where if you want to put up, like something like that, maybe an exclamation point right there, and then a question mark right here. So in case of anybody that may want to know too, that you would really in case of anybody were to ask me that why do you think that you would want to use that for any source of username or for a password or for any kind like that, and like anybody might even say too that really that anything such as personal notes or anything, why would you want to use something like that? And it's like to me though, it's like it's like a command and a question all combined into one paragraph right here. But we're also talking about is toward it one complete full sentence, something like this. But let's just say that if it was written backwards, but you say no spacing in between, and so it's like So when we do think about these characters though, and you want to know too that why do you think that you would want to maybe use something that you started out with, on a sentence, like if you were writing to your partner, and let's just say that you were writing to your partner maybe a personal message saying such as toward I apologize or something, like maybe for a letter of apology or something like that. Or it could also maybe be about as toward it I missed going to the coffee shop with every Saturday night or something like that. And so you're wanting to know too that do you think that you would want to use a sentence like that for any source of a password or any source of login? And like everybody would probably want to know too that the way you think about that, and I want to know too that that if you were to write something like that, your partner or whoever that you're talking to is not really going to know what that means right away, at least whenever you do start writing. And let's just say if you would include this maybe like on a greeting card, that right there, if you say on there, that right there, if you just include a .com or something like that right there, that right there is the invitation. That right there is supposed to be, it's an invitation to participate in this event or something like that. And so if you were to include .com or something like that, just like that, no spacing, it's like a URL link like that right there. And so it sure seems that way that every time we think about that and want to know that the first thing that comes to your mind whenever you're trying out a new recipe is that okay, what is it? And but still, it's like say every time I think about that and want to know too about what exactly is it that you're dreaming about, and want to know too is that one of those things, of course, like everybody else would say, is to where that whenever you first start writing letters, professional writing letters, that you were starting out with the sentence by saying is to where that okay, well, what do you want to talk about, or what do you like to do, or something like that. And so every time I do think about that, and I'm always going to think about that to where that whenever it comes to codes and characters, so what exactly is it? What are they, and what exactly is it that they're used for? And for any reason at all, why do you think that you would want to spend so much time just to kind of understand what they're for? And at the time, like everybody else would even say too, that just to get a little bit more knowledge with it, but then also that if you just thought about that to where that that I actually got into it mainly because of the fact that since I was young, that I always thought that it would be kind of neat, just to be able to have maybe like you'll be working in front of working at a PC at a computer where I had the ability to where you can actually program your own writing into like a source of a access key or something like that, and where you can have virtual access to these meetings and stuff like that, and but still. But on the other hand, it's like everybody else may say is to where really, what is the key responsibility about this right here? Like a key responsibility. Well, what is what is the key responsibility here whenever it comes to stuff like that? And that the key responsibility right here would be about is toward the key responsibilities. I'll say key responsibilities would be is toward that basically another way of how you want to set is the rules and all that, but still it's like I will meet you on my that knowing about that whenever it comes to understanding this stuff that just knowing is toward it just to be aware of about the activity and that's usually what I had to say too that so every time you do think about that it's like you're 102 that these tools right here are going to give you access to where if you can figure it out, if you can figure this out on what this means, and if you can figure out what that means right there for sure, you would now be authorized to be able to have access to this account. Or you have that ability to where you can check, the data reports or something like that. You now have the logins to have access to the account, right? And that is why it sure seems that way that we probably think as to where the key responsibility would be is to where that you go ahead and I'm like that you need to know that what discipline that gives and all, but so yeah the better understanding about it as well, and also I'm like so anything that you learned about it especially. But we're also talking about the type of stuff that we used to write on our greeting cards, right? The stuff that we used to write on our greeting cards, and you're 102 that every time you do think about that, and you're thinking as toward that are the greeting cards that you would include a certain character, such as that that I miss doing with this with you, or that special shines means perfect charms or something like that, or any other source of greeting, such as toward the sweet sweet son or lovely daughter or something like that. But I really think though that whenever we do talk about codes though is that we're talking about the type of language toward it the type of language that you are asked to program, especially if we're talking about, is toward it, while you're on your smartphone and while you're at your system, while you're on your system, on your operating system, on your machine, that you are now given this ability to where you would be able to have access to this account, to the activity that goes on there, and all you have to do is just set the proper username and password, right? But like it sure seems that way that the type of passwords that we're talking about are going to be something like to where that just think about that to where you go ahead and write a love letter to somebody with no spacing. Instead of a space, you would include a certain syllable or a character, right? And so if you were to write on here such as I love you or something like that, I love you star, and if you were to put on there like maybe your name spelled backwards or something like that, TTAM and TTA RW or something like that. And so you were 102 that really, I'm like, well, what do you think that would mean if you did? Like people might say that so you got right here's go ahead, and if you want to go ahead and maybe write on there, the so it's like everybody might even 102 that I haven't tried it, but like everybody may 102 that VOL or something. I'm like something like that. I love you, I love you, would you want to go ahead and maybe write that backwards, saying I love you or something like that? Like people might want to know too that they don't really I don't even know what you mean by that, what that means right there, but still that so yeah, if that right there is supposed to be an I and an L right there, but like people might say that if you were to write I love you backwards, for sure that what do you think that you would want to use that in any source of character of a password or anything that you were working on? And but I just really think in a lot of ways that when we do talk about codes and characters, 30 characters long, right here, and knowing about that when we do talk about characters, that you can include something such as to word it yeah, working late working late after I'm like yeah said something like that after midnight. Yeah, why does that seem like yeah, so if you were to write a sentence like that with no spacing, yeah, with no spaces, and if you were to put and on there, why does that seem so totally different than compared to, I'm like, yeah, like the typical language that you used to writing when we're talking about usernames and passwords and maybe command tools, anything such as that includes a certain character with no spacing. Anybody who's going to be looking at that for sure are going to probably say is that, working late and yeah, making sure, I'm like, yeah, if you do the spell check and all that, but yeah, you see this right here, everybody? You want to know too that whenever you don't include no spacing right there, that why does it seem like that's saying something totally different than compared to how it's actually worded? And to me though, it's like what is what do I think that it looks like? It looks like it's saying is toward working late, eating by midnight or something like that, or eating for midnight or something like that. But whenever you do type in a complete full sentence though, in like no spaces right here, and that's basically, I guess, it's just another way of how you want to call us, as to where that whenever we think about password and whenever we think about username, user ID, it's basically the similar thing as writing a complete sentence spelt backwards, and also writing a complete sentence with no spacing in between. And so that's why it sure seems that way. That you go ahead and start a conversation with somebody, and a 102 that with no spacing and no pausing. So it's like yeah. So does that really put a little bit more pressure on the mind whenever you think about that? Like, and yeah, what exactly is it that you're dreaming about? And so it's like yeah. So it's like the study about the mind. What are you thinking about? And so yeah. So really, in case of anybody that may want to know too, that I don't even know. Do you really even want to try retyping this spell backwards or anything if you want to use a certain characters, for a password or something? But still, but whenever I do think about codes, though, that we keep thinking too that you think about those and want to know too that we it seems like back whenever I was younger that you didn't start using any codes, any passwords or codes until early of year 2000, and so that's why it seems like everybody else might say that the passwords, the usernames and passwords, and also like yeah, the text codes, alerts, and all that stuff that we have nowadays. And you're thinking as to where that a lot of it seems to be a lot harder now than what it used to be. And I guess they say is to where yeah, just for security reasons that they have it to where that please program may set your password to at least 30 characters long. And so yeah. So you have like keywords and characters like this right here. But in case anybody may want to know too, that why is it that this type of language seems to be a lot harder to read and understand than compared to actually writing a love letter to somebody? And let's just say that that love letter, or that just that cover letter or something like that, or any source of a note or a letter about 5 paragraphs. So you're always wanting to know too that if you were to be using any source of code, and want to know too that the main reason why you were using that is so that way you'll be able to remember that, right? You'll be able to, something to be able to you'll be able to memorize there for a little while, and then until before it expires, and so but still. But on the other hand, that when we do talk about dreaming though, and everybody else might even say that whenever you're dreaming, for sure that you're dreaming about having a conversation with somebody, and 102 that you start talking about the things that you enjoy, the things what do you do, the type of job that you do, and so it's like, one of those jobs for sure is maybe going to be, I'm like, like everybody else might say that that the job that you do that people really count on a lot of times would be is toward coordinating, and plus that any knowledge that about okay, please can you read this and tell me what this says, or I'm like, maybe computer programming or something like that, and so really that like everybody else may say is toward while at the while you were sleeping, while you were setting the codes and all that, you're writing this letter that somebody came across one of your examples of of your work on your resume, and they decided to go ahead and reach you, but or something like that. But still, I really think in a lot of ways that whenever I do speak about dreaming, though, that like everybody else may say is to where that you want to go ahead and for sure that that you want to go ahead and use maybe a code for like what you call like for best friends of the year or something like that. Best friend of the year. And do you want to go ahead and I'm like, if you want to go ahead and write that backwards or something, but I people would say, I don't know if we all get the idea of that, but like everybody else may say, that best friend of the year right here, and maybe if you were to put on here maybe 4 or 5 and in a certain character or something like that, I usually put star right here, 4314 or something like that, and so if I were to use it, and like let's just say that maybe if I use this not for a username, but maybe for a URL link or something like that. It's like let's just say that if I'm going to be using something like that right here, maybe for an invitation. So like let's just say that if I was going to be inviting somebody to participate in maybe a virtual discussion or something like that, they would see something like this right here, the best friends of the year 45 star. I'm like, maybe if it's a Instagram friend or somebody like that, and they're gonna say is this tour that that got the invite right there, but like we probably think it's toward that the best friend of the year, but you would normally see something like that. Maybe if it was, and maybe in like maybe a complete sentence or something like that. Like you go ahead and write maybe in 2 or 3 paragraphs of something like that. And want to know too that that person who received that letter, they can read that just fine. They can read that just fine. If there was spaces. But with no spacing right there, not everybody's going to know what that means right there. And so that's why it sure seems that way that, best friends of the year 45. And why do you think that you would want to spell that backwards? Why do you think that you would want to spell that backwards? And maybe if you were trying to send that to somebody, for an invitation or something like that, why do you think that you would want to spell that backwards and include, a 4 or 5 or something like that in the star? And so it's like, yeah, so every time we do think about certain characters and codes, and people say is that, yeah, just to get a better understanding of what that is. But I mean, I really don't know if anybody has really dreamed about having that ability. But, if anything, like back in the old days where you had to cut out the coupons, we had those paper coupons where you had to, like, yeah. But now you got these coupon codes and everything. And you want to know too, a lot of coupon codes would include saying something such as, after midnight or something like that, working late and after midnight. And so they would include something like, use coupon code and like, give me the shorter version right there. And I can maybe put on here tab right here and saying something like, 5, I can include on here, 9, 9 midnight or something like that. 9 a.m. midnight or something like, 9 p.m. midnight or something like that. Yeah, it's a coupon code, and not everybody's really going to know what that means and what that is right here. So you're thinking as to where that so every time you think about that, and you're 102 you actually do you think that maybe that for any reason at all, if that would be used for any sorts of coupon code or anything, but it's like you're 102 that the type of sentences like that that are used, that like anybody say that just like maybe the similar thing is to where that I am assuming what these conversations will be about, and to where that are you still interested in that? And so if you were to say something like, if you would be asking the questions, right, but only if that ice cream, and you want to go out for ice cream or something like that, and the list kind of goes on and on, but still. Yeah, so if you were to like if you had like a logo design or something like that, you want to go, you want some ice cream or something like that, and not everybody's really going to know what that says at first, especially if there's no spacing right there. And so it's like, so each time I think about that, and you're thinking as to where that the type of language that you're given, the system, such as if you're going to be using the same language whenever you do sign into your account, from an iPhone or from a mobile device, or to your, on a Mac computer or on a PC, that your 102 is to where that it's just like writing a 1 to 2 paragraph sentences with no spacing right here. But not everybody's really going to know what all that means right there. I'm like, it looks so totally different with no spacing right there. And that's why it sure seems that way, that you're 102, that so if you would actually send this to a friend, and maybe that, like, maybe with the logo or something like that, and you weren't to where, okay, yeah, I didn't recognize that at first, but okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, do I want to get some ice cream or something? And so it's like so each time you think about that, and you're warned to where that that when we do talk about codes, though, codes and characters, that are we going to be dreaming about having that ability to where you can go ahead include a message to somebody that you're talking to, and plus, have that to where you can actually speak to them, and yeah, this is how this works right here, and you just go ahead and enter that in. You'll use your phone to go ahead and enter that code in, and you just to be able to just to be able to read the message, and maybe just to be able to have those coupons mailed to you, and something like that, or just for the special offers and awards, savings, stuff like that. And so it sure seems that way that every time we do think about that, and you're warned to where that our codes are they just another way of how you want to look at that? Is maybe just a little bit like communication, like a little communication, a way of a form of communication, and I guess you want to look at that as toward that you can look at that as another form of communication for a special gift, right? And so in case somebody that may want to know too that you want to go ahead and write that too, a special gift right here, a special gift for someone. Yeah, a special gift for someone with no spacing. And I could be quite honest with everybody here that I probably would not, recognize this at first. Like everybody say that, a special gift for someone. Like anybody say that, if you were to be looking at that at first, for sure, if it was spelled backwards, for sure. If it was spelled backwards, for sure, that I don't think that I would even recognize it. And like everybody else might say that, for sure, you would not be able to recognize that, and even if you want to go ahead and say it backwards right there, and thinking too that a special gift right there, E-N-O, E-N-O, and then E-M-O-S, F, you see R-O-F, T-F-I-G, L-A-I-C-E-P-S-A. Yeah, why is it that looks so totally different than, so totally different character right there. So we can maybe ask that question almost every day, that if you were to actually spell this backwards, it sure seems that way, that you do not recognize it. You cannot recognize it. And I guess if that's really supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing, if you don't recognize it, you don't recognize it there at first, but it's basically another way of how you want to call this, is toward testing your knowledge, right? So basically the same thing as whenever you call up for codes, right? For codes, and then for passwords, that being able to dream about having that ability where you have access to your information, right? The information that you would like to have access to, but then you will be programming your system, your smartphone, and your device to where you would be able to use certain character keywords like this, and you will be having these conversations, right? But a lot of times it's like, but these right here are like maybe for like logins right here. But let's say that maybe for answers, maybe questions and answers that maybe somebody would ask like to give, so like let's just say that. But the answers are written backwards, So it sure seems that way, that why do you think that maybe we would want to try that trick? Try that to where if you would be asking the questions, but then those answers were written backwards, and I don't know if I would recommend doing that, but like everybody else may say, is to where if you get tired of hearing the same answers, for sure, you can go ahead and try reading it backwards and see if you just want to contest your knowledge about to go ahead and write it backwards and read it backwards, and just to see that if you came up with the same results or not. But it's like you're always wanting to know too that whenever you look at that, written backwards right here and no spacing right here, and thinking as to where that yeah, the conversations that you may have had with somebody, and so that's why it sure seems that way. That every time you do think about that, and you're wondering to where that yeah, well, really that you were dreaming about having an ability where you actually, yeah, you like solving puzzles and everything, but do you remember at all if that was with your left hand or with your right hand? And somebody's going to maybe say is to where, why does it really matter if I was using my left hand or my right hand? And go ahead and, yeah, left hand or right hand. Left hand or right hand. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, left hand or right hand, include a question mark right there. Were you able to work on this with your left hand or your right hand? Because, if you were using your left hand, then maybe you would have more, more luck with your left hand than compared to your right hand. And I really don't know if anybody were to be giving anybody a hard time about something like that. But let's just say if that was the case, as to where that while you were working on something, that you were using your left hand to work on it, and then you were one or two that whenever while you're working on something and find out it's not working, it's you were working on it just last night, you were working on it last night or something like that, or just last week, or you were working on it maybe an hour ago, and it was working just fine, and now it's not working, and so that would be like, yeah, like everybody else may say that yeah. Number one, were you working on it with your left hand or your right hand? Because, for sure that, you're really, that, what kind of question is that really? But just, let's just say that, if that was the case, as to where if you were working on something, writing something down, and maybe, programming a language on your system, right? Using your left hand. And let's just say that if somebody were to tell you to go ahead and switch to your left hand and see if you can go and try it again, and you switch to your right hand if you're right-handed, and switch to your left hand if you're left-handed. But it's like, yeah, so every time you do think about jobs like that, and you're warned to where that, okay, yeah, that why does it matter if I was using this or if I was using that? But it sure seems that way. That, yeah, well, really, we can't really tell what is it that you were doing, what is it that you were working on, just because of the fact that while you were working, that yeah, somebody's going to maybe be asking a question as to where that, yeah, well, really, that the system needs to recognize that the activity on what's going on with the account. So number one, if you're trying to access your account using a familiar system or maybe a familiar device, such as maybe a tablet or something like that, for sure that if they recognize it, then you shouldn't have any problem signing in. And or I say that, yeah, that was with my right hand. With my left hand, I can go ahead and try my left hand. But really, though, you always want to know, too, that any job that you're working on, that you're hardly ever asked that question about, was that with your left hand or your right hand? But in case of anybody that may want to know, too, that, you're usually asked about the language and all that, the translations of the language or something, but you really are not really asked too many times about if that was with your left hand or your right hand. But still, that whenever we do talk about certain characters, though, and codes and characters, that you're warned to where that number one, that yeah. Do you think that maybe a password or a username would look good, or an invitation would look good? As if you were to go ahead and say that I will meet you at the mall at 5 o'clock with no spacing, or something like that, and best friend of the year 45. And I don't know. I'm like, yeah, I haven't tried it, but everybody else would even say that, do you think that you would recommend using that for a username and a password, and for any purpose, for any particular purpose, why you would want to use it? Maybe just because of the fact that whenever you first joined the social networking, for sure, that you would go ahead and use something like that, and they'll probably ask you after about 90 days or so to please update that, and to change it just for your security purposes and stuff like that. But still, it's like yeah, you want some ice cream, so it's like so you would go ahead and use, yeah, like if that right there was supposed to be used for a code or something like that, but with no spacing. And so really that if you were to think about codes and characters, though, do you think that maybe that you would want to turn it into a question mark for any reason at all? And everybody else might say is to where that they're not really made for any source of question mark. What you would use them for is that you would use them for like a programming language, right? To where that that if you want to go ahead and use "Good morning, I love you" or something like that, but how many of us are going to be dreaming about having that ability to where we now have that ability to where we can actually do stuff like that, even on social media, and even by doing face chat or something like that, and maybe something such as to where that you can actually check to see what time it is, and meet on virtual call or something like that. And so it's like, yeah, the key responsibility here would be is toward you need to make sure that you keep an eye, and then that you control the activity for what goes on the account, right? But at the time, it sure seems that way, that every time I think about it. And I want to know too that codes, though, that codes are another way of how you want to cause is to where that it's like it's a language, like a key access language, right? But still, but if we're talking about maybe for like just to have access to the account, and in a way of how you want to have a web page designed, how you want to have a web page designed, just to be able to publish and present your information about business data or something like that. But still, it's like you dream about talking about something and all that, but it's like chat live, chat live with the representative or something like that, and a lot of things for which you can do, and that is why it sure seems that way. Chat live, and that's something I can also include. And if you want to go ahead and maybe include that somewhere, I'll just say maybe chat live or something, and chat live, and so it's like so every time you think about that, and I want to know too that whenever you do think about chat live, that pretty much means is to where that you're connecting with somebody who's you go to the website, and you're able to talk to somebody who's on, who's live, who's able to answer your questions and all. But anyway, but talking about for coupons and codes right here. But it's like so whenever you do dream about things, that it's like the stuff that's not really happening until but still for what you make of it, the future for what you make of it, right? And but it sure seems that way, that every time you do think about dreams, a lot of times that you're also thinking about is toward a few of them that don't really make any sense. But let's just say this person that you were talking to was maybe going to say is this toward okay, well, I like the idea of of your of your research or something like that. Well, I like the idea of that, or I like this, or if I can agree to that. And so really, that every time you do think about having conversations like that, then maybe you're going to be asking the questions to where if that person likes what you were working on, and maybe if they can agree on what you were doing. And so it's like, yeah, so if you have get in these conversations and want to know too that you dream about having conversations like that to where that somebody likes what you were doing and somebody that agrees with what you were working on. And that is why it sure seems that way, that every time you think about that, and 102 is toward, really, if it's really considered real, or what's called the reality. But still, that the typical mind thinking, especially, and so really, I'm like, do we really have the answer about whenever it comes to understanding about if you got a lot of things that you're thinking about, right? If you have a lot of things on your mind, and let's just say that, if you do have a lot of things on your mind, whenever it comes to planning ahead of time, and maybe if it is a lot of, a lot of things are going on at the same time, that you try to take one thing at a time, right? But still, but it's like every time you do think about that, having, dreaming about conversations, right? And you're always want to know too that you're not able to talk about everything, but let's just say maybe a few things that you were able to talk about. That you say is to where that you were dreaming about talking to this special somebody, and let's just say that you were only able to talk about maybe 5 agendas that came to your mind, and that was about it. And but still, so it's like so it's like every time you do think about dreams though, and want to know that do we really dream about having to memorize all this stuff right here? You're having to memorize all the passwords, having to memorize all the codes, and having to keep all this stuff right here, organized and all that. But the type of stuff that we do every day, though, but it's like but still, it's like you're always want to know too that how much is a little bit too much, and maybe that if that's just some of it is just a little bit more than what you can handle, or you can handle just a little bit more than that. And so every time you do think about this, as like if it's supposed to be any sort of job, really, that you're warned toward it. That how much do you know? Is just a little bit too much, and then just to be able to better understand it. And so that's why it sure seems that way. That whenever you do think about codes, though, that you want to go ahead and just think about it as toward a special gift for somebody. And talking about writing your keywords backwards, and but still, it's like so each time you do think about that, and 102 is to where that that another way of how you want to call it is to where a special gift of thanks, and based on the feedback, right? But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and talk about over here, talk about for a true meeting, and the for welcome. And I also want to talk about right here, talk about for welcome, and what does welcome pretty much mean? I'm like, welcome could also mean is to word it that welcome is to word it allowing for your guest to feel like they are here. That they are here. They are here, and they can stay, and then they can stay in just like an introduction, just a little bit like an introduction, and other ways of how you want to describe for welcome, right? So like let's just say that if you're going to be if you're going to be doing any sorts of publishing type work, for sure, you would want to make your guest feel a little bit more welcome, and like everybody else says, is where that whenever you do say welcome, what does welcome pretty much mean right there? And for sure, I'm like welcome, and you'll usually see that maybe like on the top, like a average size, maybe like if it's gonna be like on any sort of a public poster board or something like that, something on the top that says welcome or something like that, and but still, but at the same time, it's like that you're dreaming about having that ability to where you can actually do creative things, and want to know too, one of those creative things, of course, is maybe going to be about is that you want to go ahead and show somebody ways of how to improve something, and you've been dreaming about having that ability to where you can actually use a type of language to where you can go ahead and for codes, and so really are these codes like anybody else would say too, that are these codes are the ones that you created, or are these codes designed by the software developers? And for sure that the way we think about that too is that a lot of software developers and engineers would also provide the codes just because they were assigned codes, and that they were codes that were they were included in the programming, but still. But the way I think about it too, though, that when we do speak about codes, though, that it's another way of how you want to call us is toward it. Try, if anything, it's the type of stuff that you're gonna use it on an every other day basis, and want to know too that so each time you think about codes, though, you're gonna be thinking about that is toward it, based on your learning experience, though, is to really, about that, talk about for the gift of things right there. And but anyway, a special gift, right? The special gift of things. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day. But the way I think, I'm go easy, but pay it forward, and for I took the extra time to set a plan, and so stuff from earlier, the special gift of thanks right here. And thanks for watching, everyone.